welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of a lot of really interesting stuff. We have a lot of interesting themes relating to dark fantasy, gothic fiction, redemption, good versus evil, coming together in hard times, lots and lots of good stuff. So welcome to our show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
My name is David V. Mammina. I live here in the great state of New York. I'm in Long Island. I teach history, and I've been writing since as long as I can remember. So this is a craft that I love. So that's why I'm still doing this, and I want to thank you for hosting this. This has been so exciting.
You're so welcome. It's so good to have you. Yeah, so you sort of started to answer my first question, which is about when you started writing, and in particular, what drew you to the genres of dark fantasy and gothic fiction?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's been a question I've been trying to ask myself too. When I was young, I knew I had a really strong imagination, and I loved to play RPG video games. I loved, watching all the action movies and the anime. I just loved to indulge myself in things that were just very compelling. But as far as the dark fantasy and the gothic fiction, I cannot put a finger on the pulse of, because usually when people read my stuff, they say, wow, I didn't realize you were writing stuff like this. Because this is just not how I sort of present myself or anything. But I've always had a love for the fact that in fantasy, a good fantasy needs some realism. And realism, unfortunately, is not as bright and vibrant as people want it to be. So to make fantasy realistic for me, I needed some darkness in it. I needed some realism. I needed some real stakes. And I think that's why I like the dark fantasy, because it just seems more real, more profound for me. I think that's it.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And, I think that when you are dealing with the themes that you are, like the good versus evil, whether redemption is possible, people coming together despite their differences, like you need that darkness there for like where the journey begins, to contrast with where they end up, if that makes sense.
It doesn't only make sense. You have encapsulated everything that I write about. The way you introduce my work and what you've just said here is really the idea, the entire idea of why I write. So well done, hitting on all those points.
You.
Great.
I'm really actually curious, if you don't mind too, if you could talk about, teaching history and how that has, influenced your writing career. Because before I was a librarian, I taught history too at Stony Brook, and
Oh,
so
cool.
I love history, and I really love the connections between history and fantasy in particular.
That's an incredible thing to say because I went to Stony Brook for history. I actually learned history there.
Oh,
Yeah, and then I got my certification to teach. I absolutely fell in love with history. A little, around the time I had graduated, I got into history more, and I realized there's so much in the world I don't understand, and I'm missing a lot in fantasy because in medieval fantasy, ancient fantasy, there's a lot of history there, and if you don't know that history, you miss those points. And I also learned that to write good fantasy, you need to know history. You need to have a foundation so you know what you're writing about. And that takes research, but the research should be fun. And since I love history and I love telling stories, and I love seeing the kids like sort of light up when they hear what really happened. It's almost like they're listening to a soap opera that has no rules. Like this is really what happened. So I just love the blend of history in fantasy. I think it really does work hand in hand. And fantasy, for anyone who doesn't really like to read history or listen to history, you should try to find the right history for you. It's almost like a book. Some people say, I don't like reading. And really what I tell them is, well, you're just not reading the right books. It's the same thing about history. I don't like history, but you're not looking at the right history. It's not about dates. It's about the experience, about what happened and how crazy it is and how everything is sort of tied together if you go back into the past. All the answers are there. So that's my thing. That's my little dichotomy of history and fantasy.
Cool. Yeah, and I think that's absolutely true and a great point. That, there is something in history for everybody. And the fact that I think, being a good teacher makes you a good storyteller because you learn how to keep people's attention, how to, make a suspenseful narrative, even if it's what you are saying in the moment. I think that a lot of that translates then to the page when you're writing.
I think you're 100% right. It's almost like you are a performer because you have to put on a show,
Yes.
first of all, and you have to know how to tell the story. I know that there were some teachers I had who were so inspiring, and there were other teachers who I remember now that I'm older and I'm actually teaching it, look back and say, man, they taught this wrong because it was all over the place. And in history, there has to be a sequence. There has to be a sequence of events. There has to be the players that are the most important characters in this event. And we have to feel something. I know this sounds strange, but you're a history person. You're a reader. I'm sure you're also a writer. You know that you have to make the kids feel something to understand the impact of what's going on here. And just like you said, that there is that kind of correlation.
So, if you could tell us a little bit about your first book, because you've written a few, and I'm really curious about where your journey started.
Thank you for asking that. I love this story. In high school, I was practicing more of my creative writing, and I thought maybe I'd try to write a story for once, something that was sort of in my mind. I was kind of kicking around. That happens to all of us. And this is something I was trying out. And my English teacher noticed, Mr. Sullivan, and he said, "What are you working on there?" No one ever asked me that. I said, "Oh, I'm just putting something together. I like this idea, this, that, and the third." And he said, "Oh, would you mind if I read it?" I couldn't believe he said that. So he took it and he took time out of his day to read some of my stuff. And he would come back with notes and tell me what works, what could be improved. I couldn't believe that either. So he got me on track to think maybe I can actually do something with this. And what happened 5 years later was the Angels of Resistance was ready to go, right? A force of human beings that are very different, and they've had a history of war together. But now, this is like the old trope where humans will work together when there's a crisis, where everyone has to, sort of bury the hatchet and say, we're all going to die unless we do something to help each other survive this terrible plague of monsters. And where did they come from? Why are they here? And I think that's what he helped me improve. Don't just have an army of demons. Where did they come from? Who are they? Why are they here? Why now? And how do we stop them? And that's what I tried to do, to try to make it as real as possible, to not think, here's a big evil army. No, it's more like, why is that army here? Why do they look like that? What do they want? And that's when my writing began to improve, I think. I answered all those questions and I was able to have everyone play a part in the story. And there's real sacrifice. Whenever there's a major event, as a reader, this is not going to work out for everybody because that's not the way it really goes. So I like in fantasy, when you read something, wow, this is going to have a major impact in the story. I want them to feel those stakes. And when I published the book, it went terrible because I just didn't understand what the heck I was doing. And I thought I had it all figured out. So I learned through a lot of trial and error. I learned how to be real humble about what I'm doing. And I think Angels of Resistance has become my real heart. I think that's my child, really, that started everything. Um, so yeah, that's the story of how that started, how that went. Bad and then great. It's just a roller coaster of how things go. It never goes this way, right?
Oh,
You
100%.
always have to experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is how I think, like, entering into any art kind of works out, you have to go through that period of humbling. Because like just as a writer, you're going to face a ton of rejection, across your years of your career. And so getting resilient to that really helps you, I think, and it can make your writing stronger. Mm.
I totally agree on every point. I think a big mistake is sometimes we allow our family and really close friends to be our critics, and they're not going to tell you the real truth. Like, this kind of stinks, but we don't want to bring, or hurt your feelings or stomp on your dream. So sometimes you need that first punch in the gut to say, wow, okay, maybe I have to relook at this a little bit. Sometimes people might say, oh, he's wrong. How dare he, to try to criticize my work. But I think there's another way to look at that and say, is there something I can improve? Or is this person just crazy? Is this something I could actually do? Maybe he is nuts. I don't know. But look, you have to look inward, just like you said. It's all part of the process. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about Death or Valentus, which, I found really interesting because it draws on so many different genres. Like there's fantasy there, but there's a lot of other interesting things going on too. So could you talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, sure. Death of Volentus is a very special project for me because I never intended to write it. I really didn't. I had a short story compilation, and this was going to be a short story compilation inclusion, which was this man who is perceived as a villain, who is a necromancer. And is he a really bad person, or did he just make really bad mistakes? Because when you have all that kind of power, any bad thing you do is going to be amplified. It's going to be huge. Um, but he does do something bad. It is a terrible mistake. He is punished for it. But what happens, which is very intriguing, is I thought, what if the villain is needed to save his nemesis? Meaning, what if the hero is in trouble and the only person that really can save him or her, or who knows the environment or knows them the best, is the villain? And they have to say, look, we're going to make a deal with you. We're going to find a way to shorten your sentence or whatever you can do to try to get them to come over to say, you know this forbidden land the best. So we're going to release you for this mission if you save her. And of course, he is totally against this. He objects because he says, she put me in this place. How dare you even think that I would? But then the deal is sort of sweetened because he thinks maybe I could take advantage of this situation because I do know this dark, forbidden land very well. Perhaps I can sort of manipulate things behind the scenes and try to get out of it. But what's really intriguing to me is and this is really what made me write the story, this scene, which isn't essentially a spoiler. Everyone knows it's going to come because I've been talking about it. But what happens is when he and the other hero in the story, when they get to her and he sees what they've done to her, right? I think that's what snaps him. I think he sees this is my opponent. This is my foe. That, it's almost as if, how dare you do this to my enemy? This was me. I was supposed to do this, not you. How dare you treat her this way? You know what I mean? It's like that snap. And instead of being one to try to hurt her, kill her, get vengeance on her, he now sort of becomes her savior to get her out of this dark place. And as he's trying to get her out, the person who is in command of this dark cult is someone that he knows very well. She is called the Plague Priestess. And what many people don't know and what they should have known is that he and her had a relationship and it didn't end well. So what you're getting here is high emotional adrenaline stuff of where they're trying to escape with her, because usually she's the hero. She's the one that saves everyone else. But in this case, the roles are sort of switched. And she too is wondering, why is he doing this? And I think it sort of puts into perspective, what does it mean to be good? and what does it mean to be evil, and who survives in this world one way or the other. I think that's what drove me to write this story. So it's been a really great ride. And the last book, the third book of the trilogy, I'm almost halfway done with it. And it's almost like I'm saying goodbye to these characters. So I have to put them, I have to put them on the shelf and say I gave them the respect that they deserve, to finish the tale.
Wow. Do you have a preference for writing standalone novels or for writing series? Does one come more naturally than the other?
It's another good question. You know what? Usually when I think of writing, I think of writing a book. That's it. And that's what this was. This was, I'm going to write Death or Valentus, and I'll let it go and let the readers read it and think of how it ends and what they think would happen next. But the people closer to me were asking me, well, what happens next? Like, does it stay like this, or what happens? What's the effects? You're right. Like, I guess I could continue. It's in my mind, and that's what it turned into. And I wrote the second one, and it took place in a masquerade ball in which they're all trying to find a way to make peace. And of course, it goes totally upside down. And I said, "This is great. Now I have to find a way to make a resolution for this." And I think that's what I'm about to do. I'm going to I have Death or Valentus, and now I'm going to have the bookend to hold everything together. And I think that's how it kind of went. It was never a plan like that. But the Angels of Resistance that we talked about earlier is one book, but it isn't. I wrote two books, first and the second, which are in one book now. And I did that with another book series called uh, Redeem the Night, which is a trilogy, but I put that in one book as well. So instead of finding all the books, you just read the whole thing through. And some of them are a standalone. There's an historical fiction novel. There's a psychological thriller novel. So I guess it's what the story wants me to do. I think a lot of writers know that after a while, it's the characters that sort of tell you what's about to happen, and you have to finish their story. They're sort of like beckoning you to finish the story this way. That's kind of how I go.
I've heard that from authors before who say that, like, at first you are telling the characters who they are, and then at some point they start telling you who they are and what they're going to do, which is very interesting to me. Like when they become real enough to have a life of their own.
So true. Yeah, I think you said that really well.
Thanks. You've also written for a number of age groups because you have a lot of adult fiction, but you've written YA in there as well. How is that different for you?
You know what's really funny about that? So that book, Paltronus, was another short story. And that short story, I thought, what's really funny? This is being told by a narrator. And I thought, what if there's more behind the story? So this story, Paltronus, is sort of spoken through this storyteller, and everyone is in this tent, this massive tent, and they're all listening to her tell the story. But through her story, you actually see what really happened behind the scenes as well. And I thought that was really fun and compelling way, because I think I've seen it in shows and movies where you're watching a movie and then you hear someone else's voice start to narrate it, and then you see, oh, this is actually a tale that's being told. I don't know if you remember the Never-Ending Story, remember that movie?
Yeah.
So that starts out as a story, that's being told to someone being told to you. But then you get to see what really is happening. And that was my idea for that book. But ironically, that story that I wrote, Paltronus, believe it or not, Death or Valentus takes place in that world. I don't make it obvious, but for someone who reads Paltronus, they'll realize that this is a fairy tale that sort of sets the foundations for the world of Death or Valentus, but many hundreds of years later. So you still see some of the impact of what happened in that story, some of the kingdoms and what they've turned into, and also some of the consequences from that. But there are lessons in that story. It's just not as dark. There's a lot more hope that's clearly evident, and it's a much shorter read. And there's there's no naughty words either. So I guess that helps too. But yeah, that's sort of an interesting pull, I guess, from my little arsenal of work that I've done.
I like to dig deep. And to continue doing that, I know that you have also designed a deck building card game, and I am so interested in that because it ties a lot of your work together, if I understand correctly.
It does. It's been like this little passion project I've been working on. It's very ambitious, but it's essentially finished. I've sold copies at different kind of cons and some book fairs and stuff like that. But it's really exciting because I've been working on it. I mean, it's been like 13 years, 14 years I'm working on it, mostly because of the art. I wanted the art to be really authentic, and I can tell you I put probably a pretty penny into it to get artists to really make those cards look beautiful. But it's from characters of the Angels of Resistance and characters from Redeem the Night, and you basically have your little army, and each person will draw a card. And in that card, it might be an upgrade for a character, it might be an upgrade for his character, for which you would take that and you would essentially steal it. And they might want to try to steal it back for their characters. But you're going to be fighting your enemies, villains from the book. You're going to have a chance to fight each other every now and then. And it's just a fun interactive game. It could last 30 minutes. It could last an hour, depending on how intense the game is. I lost against my brother. I think that game was 5 minutes long. So there's a lot of different things that can happen, but I'm always trying to improve it. And what's really exciting is to put the cap on it. The Death or Voluntus characters are going to show up in this game, and they're going to show up in a way that I'm going to get. I have a little 3D printer. I'm going to make little busts, I think you call them, of the characters, and you use a bust as you're playing on your side, and that character will be able to sort of play the game themselves as well. They'll have their own little characters and things you can do. So, for instance, Valentus is a necromancer. If you have him playing the game with you, he can take a card and say, I want to resurrect this character. You know, fun things like that I'm adding to it, and it'll just look nice on a bookshelf or something, you know, those busts. So I'm always working on things to make it more exciting for everything, for everyone, really, to have a good time. And I'll be at the Cradle Con in May, the Cradle of Aviation. So you might see some of those deck, I think I have 3 card games left. So I'll probably bring those with me.
Oh, very cool. Well, I think I might be attending that for the library, so I'll try to.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Well,
That's great.
thank you so much for joining us and sharing your work with us. Do you want to tell our listeners where they can get your work if they're interested?
Sure. I want to thank you again for this. This was so lovely. I had such a nice time talking with you.
Thank you.
Great. So you can find my stuff on mamminabooks.com. So it's my last name, books.com. All my stuff is there, everything. My card game, my books, everything. And also I'm on YouTube as a Mammina Books and Games. And I'm on Instagram, my name, David V. Mammina. You could find me all over the place, I guess, if you just go hunt me down. I'm out there. But I want to thank you as well, the readers, for giving me the spark that I need to actually keep doing this. I appreciate everybody that has an interest in what I do. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been an absolute delight. And yeah, I am so excited to recommend your books to our patrons. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it. Have a great day, okay?
You too. All right, it's time to close this chapter, listeners. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.